Hi, so for the first week we are going to be drawing in 1 point perspective, and we're going to start with drawing cubes. So what I've drawn is a horizon line and a vanishing point in the middle, and I'm going to start with 20 squares just randomly placed, squares and rectangles. You can make them long and narrow, and then I draw all of my lines back to that vanishing point. So you notice I keep my ruler going from each corner back to the vanishing point. And to draw a hollow one, I take all four corners back to the vanishing point. I close them off at certain distances just to keep them from going all the way back and being ever long. So the idea of linear perspective is that we have a diminishing scale. Things get smaller as they go further back. And with this exercise, I'm also going to have you do some cylinders as well, as you can see in the bottom. So for this week, all we're going to do is contour drawing, so just the outlines. And then you can also go and add cross contours like I've done to the cylinders as well. So here I am, again, starting with a vanishing point. And this exercise, I'm just going to show you cylinders in all three directions. I start with a box, and I cross the corners of each of the squares in order to find the center of the box on the top and the bottom. And that allows me to have kind of guidelines that allow me to draw these ellipses inside that box. And you notice, so this is above and below the horizon line. So it's going to curve up and curve down on the top and the bottom. And here I've come in and I've added cross contour lines. The angle of the cross contour gets wider as it's above and further above and further below the horizon line. This one I'm going to have a cylinder going off into the distance. So it's easy to find the center of the square. Again, I find the center of the square by crossing the corners, and that's how I can find that center point, and then I can draw directly across. I connect the circles so that I can create this cylinder. And here I'm going in and drawing all my lines, again, back to that vanishing point. Here I'm going to do one on its side. So I'm going to find all of the angles and all of the corners. And this time you can notice that as it's closer to the vanishing point, it's narrower and further away, just like it is with the vertical one. It's going to be a wider ellipse as it gets further and further away. So showing you here, I'm using different ellipse templates, and each ellipse template is a wider angle as I get further and further away from that vanishing point. So one thing to always notice is how, as I mentioned, as you get further away from that vanishing point, that ellipse is going to widen up. Also with my vertical cross contour lines, they're going to be closer towards the edges than they are towards the center. This gives the illusion of the shape. So I'm going to do this exercise one more time, and I'm going to do this one in pen so that you can kind of see the different colors and the different lines that I'm drawing. So again, I'm going to draw 20 squares or rectangles all over the page. So things to notice, that anytime the square goes over the vertical axis or the horizon line, you're only going to see two sides of the cube, and that's because you're losing the view of one of those sides. So here I am. I'm drawing all of my rectangles and squares, my cubes, hollow, and I'm squaring them off so that I can make a actual cube. Okay, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to pick a few of them and I'm going to turn them into cylinders. And um, the way that also one thing to notice is that I draw a little bit further than I want to go and then just erase. But everything is going to be a vertical, horizontal, or a vanishing line, a line that converges towards the vanishing point. I'm going to want you to do 20 cubes and then 10 cylinders inside those cubes. And so to do the cylinders, it's best to show a hollow rectangle, or hollow cube rather. So as you can see there, I've gone in and now I'm darkening up to show you which is the side that's facing us closest. And this is what I'm looking for with your first sketchbook assignment. And here's a couple examples of past students' work doing this exercise. So we do this so that we can essentially draw rooms. And so your second sketchbook drawing this week is going to be to draw a room in 1-point perspective. So I'm going to want you to photograph a room as far back, but looking straight forward towards the back wall. So I figured out where my vanishing point is, and I can do that by laying a ruler on the lines. And where several of the lines meet is going to be where my vanishing point is. And I measured out my distances, and so you're going to scale your photograph, or you can draw from observation. But you have to kind of measure visually, either with a ruler or with estimation. And notice how I bring all of my lines that come towards us back from that vanishing point. So I'm kind of laying out all the shapes, and I measure them and then I scale them. So if I print an an A4 photo, and I'm working in an A3 sketchbook, you're going to scale it 1.5 times. So all of your measurements should be 1.5 times larger than your photograph. Best way is to kind of figure out what the width of your paper is of the photograph, and what the width of your picture plane is, what you're drawing on, and figure out how much bigger it is. And then scale everything, both the height and the width, to that, as well as your lines converge. So I do a kind of a quicker drawing, and then I'm coming in and I'm darkening up my my lines when I know that they're in the right place, going back to the right angles. Okay, and all I'm looking for is just outside lines, contour lines this week. So no need to do any shading. We'll talk about shading next week. But as you can see here, all of my lines again are horizontal or vertical, or they lead back to that vanishing point, because they're all parallel, and they show that things get smaller as they get farther away. Notice how the chairs are much bigger than the oven and the dryer and the washer. I'm going to do another angle in my house, and as you can see again, like all of the lines where the ceiling meets the wall, where the couch or the table, they all lead back to a vanishing point. And that vanishing point is right below that square painting on the back wall there. So I go in, I measure everything out, and I start, once I can figure out my height and width of my back wall, then I can start to bring that vanishing point out from the corner. So I start with that back wall and lead over to where the door is, and I start measuring and drawing this left side wall. And I notice that it's not quite right. It doesn't seem like the angle is correct, and I'm going to have to figure out what to do about that. So you can make some mistakes when you're drawing with pencil, and now I've realized, oh, maybe the area in the hallway to the back door is a little too wide. Notice how the angle was not quite right on my left side wall. So I'm going to narrow that, and it'll start to look better. And now this angle looks more appropriate, and it matches the angle in the photograph. So always double check, make sure, because you might not get it right the first time. So you go in. This couch I'm going to actually draw a couple times just to make sure I've got it in the right place. But essentially all I'm doing is I'm starting with boxes. I'm building the couch out of cubes that are next to each other, adjacent to each other. And then I'll soften those cubes up to show the cushions and so forth of the couch. And it looks like it's a little too far away, so I'm going to actually bring the couch a little closer to me. And now I'm going to just kind of lay out the details of the couch. But again, it still feels, like I mentioned, it feels like I didn't make the couch quite long enough. So I need to extend the couch down a little bit more, and I'm going to do that here in just a moment. I'm going to come in, because always double check, look at things, and if they don't feel quite right, then you need to assess why that is. So I'm going to look at the relationship of the two couches to one another, and the back couch is pretty easy to draw. Just the arm cushions are going to kind of lead back to that vanishing point sharply. Okay, so now I measure the painting, and the painting is going to give me kind of a better clue as to how far the couch needs to come forward. And you can't see it in the picture, but there's also a entertainment center next to it. So now I'm going to look at this table and measure out the table. I notice that the table is come much further in comparison to the couch. So that is going to mean that I need to bring that couch more closer to us. But I draw the table just like I would the cubes, but I make exceptions for the negative space around the table and the shelf underneath it. Okay, so here I am back to this couch, and bringing it further and further closer to us because it was not long enough. And you'll notice how things like the couch is broken in half by the two cushions, but the cushion that's further away is less than half the distance, right? So these distances are broken up in such a way that you're going to have to kind of measure, and the best way I find is to actually cross your angles, cross your diagonals, so that you can see which ones where the center is, and cross that line. I do this with tiles on the floor as well. So the way that I built the tiles on the floor is essentially by figuring out how many tiles were along wide side, and then make equidistant points along the back, and then draw those lines back from the vanishing point. So again, notice how all my lines do come back from the vanishing point. And when I do the tiles, I'm also crossing the diagonals to find the center point. And I can break it down half and half and half each time to get exactly what is true squares, or half of the distance from one point to the next. Here I am going in and filling in with marker, black pen, when I feel confident about where lines need to be. Okay. And so you're not required to work with ink, but I'm doing it for the demo just so that you can see the final lines I've chosen to be as accurate as possible. And it allows me to come up with a determined line. Whereas when I'm working with just the graphite, the pencil, and I suggest using mechanical pencil or a well-sharpened pencil for this exercise. Then I can use that to erase, and I can play around with it. So you notice how I've taken those cubes that I created for the couch, and I've curved them and softened them. I've softened their edges, but it's basically all built out of squares and boxes. And again, notice there's only three kinds of lines. There's vertical lines. There's like what you would see on the edge of the wall or the sides of the paintings. There's horizontal lines like you see on the tiles or the front and the back of the table, the bottom and the top of the paintings. And then there are converging lines. So all lines will be one of those three: vertical, horizontal, or converging. So I'm going to do one more example. This is going to be actually based off of memory of the hallway at AUK. And so I started with that back wall and my vanishing point. And I build off of it so that there's a little space for the stairway. And then I also build some space so that you can go around this wall and into the bathroom. And so it's creating, by making my vertical line higher and lower than the stairwell, then I can start to see space, this illusion of space that is allows me to go behind it. On the other side, you notice that the wall has been indented. I indented the wall so that I could add lockers, and the lockers are actually in that indented space. For the tiles on the floor, I know that there's 15 tiles wide, and so I measured equidistant tiles, and then I drew all of those lines back from the vanishing point. And then the way I determine the widths of the tiles is I cross my diagonals, and wherever my diagonals cross, so just within one section of tiles, I did I crossed them. I was able to break them in half, and each time broke them in half again and again and again. And that's how you get that illusion of depth. The tiles should get smaller each level back. Each one should be smaller than the one in front of it. Same with the tiles on the ceiling as well. So, and then I come in and do my details last. Don't try to do details until you've laid out all of your lines, all of your shapes, and there you have it. And now I'm going to show you some examples of students' work. So when we're meeting On campus, we would always do this drawing in the hallway. And in the first week, all I'm looking for is just a simple line drawing. You don't have to worry about any shading. But as you notice, all of those lines converge back to a vanishing point. And it's very important that these lines go back to the vanishing point. Don't try to make your your converging lines go to the corner of the paper. The corner of the paper doesn't matter where it's at. That's irrelevant. What's always relevant is that the lines always go back to the vanishing point. So always double check and make sure that that's what's going on. And notice how the tiles are all getting smaller as they get further and further away. That's really important to create that illusion of depth. You can also you notice some of these aren't directly in the middle of the hallway. So your vanishing point does not always need to be in the center of the paper. You can move your vanishing point left or right, but always make sure that you're looking, for 1 point perspective, you're looking straight on towards the back wall or window of whatever room that you're drawing. And so when you're taking photos this week, it's best to stand back as far as possible in the room so you can capture as much of the room as possible. And that's really the most important part of it. This is going to be your first sketchbook, so I'm not expecting it to be perfect, but I would suggest maybe practicing this drawing a couple times. So for the first week, I want you to photograph 5 different rooms in 1 point perspective, and then choose the one that you feel most comfortable with starting. You'll be drawing more of the other photos later next week, so it's not necessary to do the most complex drawing in your first week. What I'm just looking to find is that you can comprehend how the illusion of depth is created with these converging lines and linear perspective. And that's really the whole idea here, because once you start to understand that things aren't flat, that there is space and this depth and diminishing scale. So when I say diminishing scale, I mean that things get smaller as they get further away. You start to comprehend that all these lines do come back to a vanishing point. That's the main lesson of this week. And it's really all, once you figure out how to do the cubes and get those looking correct, then you'll have a better understanding of how to do a room. Because a room is really just a box. It's just a cube with other cubes or rectangles and squares inside of it. But you'll notice how for the indented spaces, like where the lockers are, there's a horizontal line that creates that space. So here's an example of a student drawing in their house, and this is in the library here at AUK. And it's really just important, as you notice, that all lines keep going back or are vertical and or horizontal. Okay. Good luck. If you have any questions this week, email me. You can send me your drawings for feedback, and I'll be glad to critique them.